All right, so I'm just going to add a few comments to John Green on the sonnet. So a sonnet is broken up into four parts. The first four lines is called the first quatrain. The second four lines is the second quatrain, and the third is the third set of four lines is the third quatrain. They're called quatrains because they're groupings of four lines: quarter, quattro, quatrain, four. And then the couplet is always a rhyming pair of two lines at the very end. So when you think of a sonnet, you should imagine that there are sort of imaginary stanzas, which are like little poem paragraphs, little structured sections. And you should try to figure out whether or not the quatrains contain an idea or if that idea sort of moves from one quatrain to another. But there should be some kind of structural or thematic difference between the different sections of the poem. So sectioning the poem this way is the first step of thinking about like what a sonnet might mean. So the first quatrain, second and third can all be played against each other, or they could further develop an idea. So really, they could do whatever they want, but there usually is some kind of like meaningful separation, even if it's just punctuation that separates the three quatrains. Now, the final couplet is supposed to be snazzy. It is supposed to be tricky or interesting, or some kind of like turn or snazzy thing. Maybe it emphasizes something, it summarizes something, or has a surprise ending. But the last couplet definitely usually has some sort of difference to it. So noting that the couplet is different is also really important. The rhyme scheme is kind of important. Sometimes Shakespeare has very interesting rhyming pairs. Rhyme scheme is a vocabulary term that deals just with poetry in English, and the way that you note a rhyme scheme is that you use letters that denote the end rhyme. So A B A B for the first quatrain. This is the first quatrain right here. The first four lines. This is line 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the poem. And this is saying that line 1 has end rhyme with line 3, and line 2 has end rhyme with line 4, A, B, A, B. Then we have the C rhyme that kicks off the second quatrain, which can't rhyme with any of these last words right here. So this is the second quatrain, the third quatrain, and then a couplet has to be two lines that rhyme with each other at the end. We're talking only about end rhyme here. So the rhyme scheme for the Shakespearean sonnet does tend to separate the poem into those four sections, the three quatrains and the final couplet. But sometimes, like, there's some clever commentary about like why words might rhyme. Like sometimes there's irony where words might rhyme with each other, even though their meanings are opposite. So there's sometimes really interesting contrast there. The sonnets are roughly written in iambic pentameter. When Shakespeare breaks iambic pentameter, it's usually for a reason, and it creates this sort of mix up in the rhythm. And usually there's something to comment on it. An iamb is a line of poetry that goes unstressed, stressed. It's words have natural stresses in the way that they are pronounced, and the natural rhythm of English is iambic. Da 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 da. So iambic pentameter means that we have iamb, which is a two-syllable chunk, do da. It sounds like this, do da. And then pent means five. So we have five do das, which means that the short sort of way to put it is that the Shakespearean lines in the sonnets are going to have 10 syllables per line, and you should watch for lines that have fewer or more syllables because those lines stick out, and that was probably done intentionally. And there's usually something interesting about those lines. So the word volta is a little bit fancy for me. I kind of never like that word. But if you want to be fancy, you could call it a volta. I like the word turn because it is a little more descriptive for what it is. The sonnets always have some kind of turn, and the turn usually happens between quatrains. Most often, it is right before the couplet. The turn is where the poem suddenly changes thought, or tone, or mood, or even subject. So sometimes the poem might be about nature, and the whole poem is about describing nature, but then in the last couplet, it starts describing love or a person. The volta is some sort of change you should recognize those voltas. Look for words, punctuation that sort of change the meaning of the poem. All right, now we get to the fun part. These are the themes of the sonnets. Love is a very common motif, but whenever love appears, it is traditionally not a good thing. It is usually unrequited, which means unreturned, or it's unattainable, or it's lost. Beauty is a common motif. A motif is like a repeating idea. A theme is a statement on that idea. The theme on the motif of beauty is usually negative. Usually it's about how beauty never lasts, or it's fleeting, it's perishable, it's non permanent. As far as the motif of time, which is a common recurring idea in poems or topic, the themes are about it being fleeting or finite or even injurious. It's devouring, it's a thief, it's a bad thing. Death is always uh, present in these poems, not always, but very frequently there. And sometimes death is seen as a positive thing. And this sounds all depressing and all, but really it's just, it's more interesting to read a poem that has like a unique take. Generally, people are afraid of death. So when you write a poem that kind of portrays death as a good thing, it's going to grab people's attention. It's going to be interesting. Um, Mortality. There's conversations about the motifs of mortality versus immortality, what is lasting and enduring and what is temporary. And then also some sonnets are written with religious meanings. Later themes, like leading into the Enlightenment, we have themes on social criticism, liberty, and alienation. There are several sonnets written by abolitionists that are really interesting. Okie dokie. So, here's some of the sonnet vocabulary that you should have by now. A sonnet means little song. It's a short little poem. It is 14 lines long. Quatrain are the first three groupings of 4 lines in the poem. The couplet is the last 2 lines. The turn of the volta is where the poem shifts into another topic. Meter is the rhythm of the poem, and in sonnets, that rhythm is iambic pentameter, which is 5 pairs of 2 syllables. So a line of iambic pentameter goes do da, do da, do da, do da, do da. And it sounds like this: Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? You wouldn't really read it that way, but like you could. And if you can read something in that sort of iambic rhythm, it's going to be iambic. Tone is the author's attitude towards the subject, and we just went over a bunch of themes that sort of reveal the tone or the attitude. For example, beauty is typically seen as fleeting and untrustworthy and temporary. Mood is a little bit different than tone. Mood is the atmosphere of the poem. It's like the words kind of create a feeling in the reader, sometimes suspense or surprise or sadness or happiness. There's some other words that we've already studied in our poetry vocabulary that you should have a general idea of. Irony is kind of tricky. Irony is usually an unexpected element in the poem. You think one thing will happen and something else happens. Like it is somewhat ironic to write a poem that, um, you know, takes a subject like death and tries to make it sound like a good thing, or beauty and make it sound like a bad thing. That is sort of, there's a lot of irony in these poems. Yeah, so it looks like we covered all of that. So in a minute here, we're going to go over the first sonnet, 18, and I'm going to show you how to annotate it. So you're going to head over and you're going to open assignment 30, and you're just going to copy me as we go. And then you'll do the next sonnet on your own to see, what you got out of this. So luckily, I'm here. We're not going to have Patrick Stewart read it. I'm going to read it to you because why not? So here's the general idea. There's like left-hand side annotations, which is usually about understanding the gist of the poem. There's centerline annotations, which are about looking for literary elements and devices. And then there's right side annotation is where you talk about insights, where you talk about the author's purpose and the theme. So we kind of go from simple, advanced to, the target, which is a commentary on the poem on the right. So it's left to right in complexity. The right side should be the most complex annotations you make because you actually have to interpret the literary elements. So, yeah. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and ask you to pause the video and have everyone head over to assignment 30 and have your screens kind of look like mine here. All right, I may have misspoke. We want assignment 31, and you're going to open it, and you're going to open it up in Cami, and I'm going to go ahead and annotate the first sonnet, Sonnet 18, the one that John Grain went through, and we're going to follow all of the instructions in the annotation document. You'll see me flip between these two as I explain each instruction. Alrighty, so let's take a look at the directions. The directions say the left-hand side, the first thing we have to do is bracket the quatrains and summarize the main idea, bracket the final couplet and summarize the main idea. So I'm going to use the drawing shape here, and I'm just going to draw. Ooh, that's too big. Let's make that a little bit skinnier, huh? That looks pretty good. Now let's make it red. Red will stand out here. And so I'm just going to draw. There's quatrain 1, quatrain 2, quatrain 3, and quatrain 4. Go ahead and pause the video if people need a little bit more time to get ready, and I'll just kind of stay silent for 5 seconds so someone can hit the pause button. Don't want to move too fast here. All right, so the first quatrain here is, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. So we have to come up with sort of an idea here of what that first quatrain is. Well, it starts with a question about, well, do you want me to compare you to a summer's day? And then it talks about how summer is not as good as the subject of the poem, that it's windy and it's short-lived. So let's see here. I'm going to say something like the main idea. I'm just trying to get the gist here. Summer is worse than you. Make this like that. There we go. And we'll use like a colon here. Yeah. It's windy. Rough winds do shake those darling buds, and short-lived. S is summer. Summer is too hot. And cloudy. And this whole thing about how actually, you know what? I'm getting into the second quatrain. Sorry, I'm starting to read the second quatrain. Hold on. That's it. I'm just going to say that. All right, there we go. So that's the first quatrain. We got another text box here for the second quatrain. This is where we get too hot. Yeah, sometime too hot the high heaven shines. So summer is too hot. Sorry for the interruption. So let's read the second quatrain here. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is its gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometime declines by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. So the first line is pretty clear. It's about how summer's too hot. The rest of it is about how summer, it never really maintains this perfect temperature. So it's okay. So it's it's too hot, and then sometimes it's too cloudy. That's what the gold complexion of the sun here. The eye of heaven is the sun, and the gold complexion dimming here is the cloud. So sometimes it's too hot, sometimes it's too cloudy. And the weather always turns bad. Yeah. Can't read that. Yeah. And I'm getting this, the weather always turns bad right here where it says, in every fair from fair, sometime declines. And sometime means eventually. Like it eventually declines by chance or nature's changing course and trim. So just by chance, the weather changes. If you ever been to London, you know that the weather is very mercurial and it changes a lot. And the changing course untrimmed is the changing seasons. All right, the third quatrain. This is where we get a turn. The turn in the poem exists here. It's signaled by the word but, which tells us that the poem is changing to another subject. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So we'll put a text box here. And essentially, it's saying that your eternal summer shall not fade. So I'm going to call that beauty. I think the eternal summer here is going to be beauty here, or loveliness. Loveliness might be a more inclusive term. So I'm going to say your beauty will never fade. That sounds good to me. And it's more than that because at the bottom it says that death will never be able to brag that you're wander in his shade, which is a pretty good metaphor for death, being in the shadow of death, the grim reaper. So this is saying that not only will your beauty never fade, but you'll never die. Even though it does say that in eternal lines to time thou growest. So you will know eternity, but that eternity will not be death, which means that your beauty will never fade even after death. Now, I don't know how many dead bodies you've seen, but dead bodies are not beautiful. So this is a bit of a contradiction. Now, a contradiction can become an elevated literary element called a paradox if it is resolved, if there is a meaningful interpretation of that contradiction that makes it not a contradiction, but some sort of insight. And we get that in the last quatrain that John Green already talked about. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to me. So it all comes down to what the pronoun this means. Now, the word this is indefinite. This is one of those sort of literal terms that is implied, and it's implied by breathing and seeing. See, we need breath to read the poem, and we need eyes to read the poem. So as long as we can breathe and see, the poem will give life, will preserve the beauty of the beloved. So here I'm going to put, um, I've made, what should I say? I've made your beauty eternal by capturing it in poetry. Hooray. Essentially what he's saying. It's like, you're welcome. I wrote this beautiful poem that's going to make you, it was inspired by your beauty. Therefore, your beauty lasts forever. You're welcome. So that's the left-hand side annotation. We got four little kind of gists of the poem here. Next up, we're going to go through, like Sherlock Holmes here, and look for clues. We're going to look for all the center annotations. We're going to follow these instructions. The first one is underline loaded words. So a loaded word is a word that exists on an emotional spectrum, and it contains a lot of emotion, either positive or negative. I'm not talking about fancy words. We're not looking for words that we don't understand that are hard to understand. We're done with that. If a word is hard to understand, look it up. We're just looking for words with strong emotions. All right, so here's the poem again. Let's pick some words to underline. I think lovely in line 2 is pretty good. That sounds pretty good. Temperate actually is not very loaded. I like darling. Maybe shake. I don't think so. Rough for sure. That's a good one. I don't know about hot and maybe gold. If you want to say gold, that's fine. Fair is pretty good. Fair means like beautiful, pleasant. I think the word brag has a lot of emotion. The idea that the Grim Reaper brags about his conquest, that seems to be kind of a feeling there. Maybe give life. I'm okay without it. I want to have a pretty high bar for what I say is a loaded word. Next up, we're going to circle imagery. Now, there could be overlap. We might find words that have strong imagery and are loaded. I like green, sure, why not? So I think the rough winds, I can hear the winds blowing or feel them. That sounds pretty good. Shake, I can kind of see those darling buds. Of course, we could circle the buds, sure, why not? But I'm not going to. Um, I think shake is a little bit more of an image. But if you want to do the buds, why not? Let's do it. Because you could just do all common nouns, but it gets a little bit much. Hot for sure is a word that evokes a feeling or a sensation. The word shine as well. Why not? Gold is a color and a substance. It's metallic and shiny, and that seems pretty good. The word dim sort of plays off shines. That's pretty cool. Then we kind of lose a lot of imagery here until we get down to the shade. If you want, if you think death is like a grim reaper, and that like gives you a feeling, you could do that as well if you wanted. At the bottom, the breathing I can hear, and that's about it on imagery. Um, and yeah, that's pretty good. Next up, we have to put a triangle next to the figurative language. So I'm going to go here to insert triangles here, and I'm just going to do it every line. So right here, we have the darling buds of May. The word darling makes me think there's a bit of personification going on here. Also, like, I don't know if you caught it, but a lot of these descriptions of summer are also descriptions of types of people. Like rough winds could not just be summer, but it could be a metaphor for a type of person that speaks harshly. Rough winds could be like their voice. And then summer's lease hath all too short a date. Um, so Shakespeare's comparing a person that he loves to summer, and summer doesn't last very long, and he's trying to say that summer's length is less than the length of their relationship. In other words, if a person were to be like summer, if a relationship were to be like summer, it would only last a season. It wouldn't be like a union that lasts forever. Here we have the eye of heaven. That's pretty obvious personification. And then we use male pronouns like his, and we say he has a complexion, like a face. That's definitely personification. Down here we have thy eternal summer shall not fade. And here eternal summer or summer is seen as the beauty. And here it's an eternal summer. They're using summer here as a metaphor for inner beauty. Here we have a personification of death. So that's definitely figure of speech. And at the bottom, I don't think that Shakespeare is saying that like the poem like literally brings life to a person, but rather the poem sort of captures the beauty. So we're kind of oh, wait, there's a little bit more we have to do in the center. Okay, we have to scan every line and highlight lines that are not in iambic pentameter. I think the poem is actually perfectly in iambic pentameter, so there's nothing to highlight. And then we just have to draw a line at the turn. And this word but here definitely signals that turn. So I'm going to bisect the poem by just drawing a line here. Uh, I could have also. That's ugly. I'm going to fix it. I don't like the way that looks. I'm going to use the line tool instead. Yeah. Right here. See, now it's a nice straight line. Ooh, it looks pretty. So we don't have much room here on the right because we have to leave ourselves room for Sonnet 29. So down here, I have to do the theme or the author's purpose is best presented. And I'm supposed to find the lines and restatement. Okay, I think it's kind of at the very bottom here. And I think that this sonnet is not just about um, an individual's beauty. I think that the sonnet is about the power of poetry to sort of capture beauty for posterity. Like, um, so I think I could defend this as like the ultimate topic of the poem. If you want to just say that, like, Shakespeare captured the beauty and just kind of basically ditto the last quatrain, that's fine. But I think he's saying that poetry um, has the power to make the um, temporary permanent. No, that's pretty good. And I think that that is the last two lines here of the poem, right here. I think that's where it's coming from. So I would put it right there. So anyway, that's how you do. And it's supposed to be on the right hand side, but I didn't give enough room, so I kind of changed it up here. It says right/bottom, so you can put it at the very bottom. Alrighty, so you're going to go ahead and try to do Sonnet 29 next, and we'll maybe have a little discussion about it either at the end of the period or tomorrow. You can finish it for homework, just Sonnet 29. We'll do maybe a sonnet a day or every other day as we get into Hamlet starting tomorrow. Good luck.